You've seen it. If they're suffering outside of sport, they're not going to excel in sport. It's not a switch where you just shut it off, and vice versa. If they're not doing well in sport, they're going to suffer outside of sport.
Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman. I'm a family man, a coach, a wannabe athlete. After earning 3 master's degrees and countless certifications, I've decided that podcasting is how I'm going to continue my education in all things wellness, longevity, and performance. Join me to learn along.
Yeah, St. Charles. And so I've had a private practice for quite a while.
Yeah.
Since 2005, I guess, private practice. But I only work with adult elite athletes.
Okay.
So basically 18 and up. Very few high school athletes. Once in a while, if they're elite type athletes. College athletes, obviously, D1, D2, not a lot of D3. And of course, all your professional athletes from everywhere.
Okay, so you're over there, and are your clientele coming to visit you more, or do we have the population in town, or is it more of like a?
So I have an office in my home,
Yes.
which is great.
Yeah.
I have my own, it's huge, it's like 250 square feet office space. So it's really good. So I had athletes come into my home, and then when COVID hit and everybody was transitioning to Zoom, because Zoom was still relatively new.
Yeah, from what I knew.
Yeah. And everybody had to go to Zoom for everything. And so then I do a lot more on Zoom because more people are comfortable with it. The athletes don't have to leave their home. They don't have to worry about people seeing them, and they have their own privacy, and I have my own privacy in my office.
Yeah.
So I do more Zoom now than anything.
Interesting. Okay.
Once in a while, some like to do it in person, they like that interaction, but the majority of it's through Zoom. So it works out really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Zoom was, or not Zoom, but COVID. It's kind of a windfall in my house as well. Like, I had never done any online.
I hadn't either.
Online coaching, and then when it was the only option,
yes,
I had some people that were up for it. So, we just it's funny how you get resourceful when like everything else dries up and you just kind of figure it out.
Because COVID forced you into it.
Yeah. What would you say are some like telltale signs that a group or an individual is in need of? Well, you're a mental health professional, but also a sports psychologist. Like, at what point do they sort of like? Do you think that that's the right time to bring in a sports psych
for the individual athlete?
For the individual, or for a group?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I've learned about athletes, and being a former athlete, and I'm sure you can relate to, is that athletes wait until they're in a crisis and then they come.
Okay.
And then they want you to fix them in an hour.
Yeah. That's
the idea. And they should have come months ago when something pops up. I don't know why that is. Because it's different in the strength and conditioning world.
Yeah.
Where they know they have to put the time in to see the results.
Okay.
The Rome wasn't built in a day type thing. But for some reason in the psychology realm, they want it in an hour or 50 minutes.
Okay.
To fix them type thing. And it doesn't work that way. It's a skill, just like any other skill that you have to learn and practice.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then you're going to keep suffering and struggling with it, because it is a skill, because the mind is so powerful. And we've been taught, westernized, to control. We have to have control over our minds. In the weight room, in the physical sense, you're in control.
Yeah.
How much weight you put on. You're in control how you lift it. In the psychological world, not so much. You can't control what pops into your head.
Yeah.
Strange, random thoughts, and where they come from and how they form and the connections that are made. It's very powerful, which can lead to catastrophic events.
Yeah.
Not only in a sport world, but in somebody's personal world as well.
You have how do you kind of beat that idea into your clients' minds? So like in the weight room, we might call it like external load versus internal load.
Mhm.
So like externally, it's 400 pounds. Internally, 400 pounds to someone who's not prepared to lift it is super stressful, and to other people, it's a warm up weight.
Yes.
Do you have a lingo or a verbiage that you use for your clients and kind of what they're going through and how they're feeling?
Yes. What I've learned with athletes, and you have to, so in a counseling session, just a mental health counseling session, the average session is 1. That's what, if somebody were just to come to me who was not an athlete and just do a regular counseling session, the average session you're going to get out of them is 1. So you might have the initial intake session where you get all the background information. And then after that, you might get 1 session where you're actually addressing whatever issues. And then that's it.
Yeah.
You're lucky to get 3. So with athletes, it falls in the same realm. So I have 1 to 3 sessions at most to get them. So what I did is I used to do, when I was at Lindenwood, I had these workshops that I would do. And the workshops were geared towards giving them necessary information so that they would have that at their disposal that they could use right away. But also, when I was out at practice or games and they were struggling and having an issue, and I'd only have maybe a minute or 2 minutes to talk to them, or the coach would send them over. Hey, go talk to Joe over there. We had already covered that information in the workshop.
Yeah.
And so I was able to just kind of refocus them. Hey, remember when we talked about this? Oh yeah, okay. Oh yeah, I know where I'm going now, type thing. Well, the thing I learned and from 20 years of wisdom, and that wisdom is based on the feedback that I received from athletes and coaches to modify and condense. And so I took a 7-hour workshop into 1 hour.
Okay.
And I adopted it. I found Dr. Kevin Polk. He's great. He's out of Maine. But he took like the basis of acceptance and commitment therapy and training, which brought to light mindfulness and mindful training and things like that, which most people do wrong anyway. But acceptance and commitment therapy and training is complex. It has a lot of evidence-based support and working in the mental health field and with the athletic realm. It's great. What he did was he broke it down into a learning model, a tool. And so I use that tool because athletes love tools.
Yeah,
they do. It's you teach them how to use a racket. You teach them how to use a golf club. You teach them how to throw a ball. Those are all tools. Weight room's the same way.
Yeah.
The weights, the blocks, the plyometrics, whatever, they're using tools constantly to help them learn, and athletes can relate to that. So I present them with a tool, and I do it within an hour that they can relate to, and everybody can relate to it and do it. And it helps them to develop better psychological flexibility and to learn what works and doesn't work for them in making the choices that they need to make in order to be successful. And so I found out that that's what really works for them, is giving them that tool to use. Yeah. And athletes relate to it really well.
You only get 1 to 3 sessions with them, and you got to do a lot of work.
That's about it.
A little bit of pressure on the provider there.
Well, I've learned too that I don't fix people. Yeah. And as an early clinician, I had to get over that hump. That when somebody came to me, I got to fix them. This person's struggling, I got to help them, type thing. But the secret is that you're helping them help themselves find the solutions.
Yeah.
Because if you find your own solution, you're more likely to stick with it than if I give you and provide you a solution to it. Because you know your own experiences better than anybody. And so once I learned that, I became more of kind of like a facilitator. And the tool, the diagram that we use, helps them to see that they're in charge of that, not me. I'm just helping them kind of facilitate and challenging their way of thinking without providing suggestions or advice on how to behave. As if that makes sense.
What percentage of work do you guys spend on non-athletic things? If they come to you for sports psychology, how often are you saying, do you actually just say, well, I think we actually need to address this and you need to work on other things? I mean, is there some sort of like not a bait and switch, but like they come in, they say, I want to work on, I'm having a slump hitting a baseball. And they're like, well, we need to talk about what happened, or like, we need to talk about several other things, or how does that work out?
It's a great question, because unfortunately in the field of sports psychology, mental performance, there's two sides and they clash all the time. So you have people like me who are certified in the sports psychology, mental performance realm, but I'm also licensed as a counselor.
Yeah.
And there's other people who don't hold that license.
Yeah.
And so the belief is, well, I can, those who don't hold licenses believe they can still work with athletes, but just in the mental performance realm. And my argument is, well, you can't divide the individual up, just like you wouldn't divide them up in the weight room for some reason.
Yeah.
Like you're only going to work the left side, but not the right side, because if we work the left side, then the right side will automatically get better. No, you have to train the individual holistically.
Yeah.
And so my belief, as well as many others who are in the licensed field as well, believe the same thing. You have to treat the individual holistically and the problems that they're having. So if they're struggling outside of sport, they're going to struggle in sport, and vice versa.
Yeah.
If you're struggling outside of sport, you're not going to get in sport and just excel and then leave that and then go back to your life and start struggling again. And vice versa. It doesn't work that way. So you have to look at it from a holistic standpoint. So when I work with them, that's what we're looking at. What's important to you? And then what's getting in the way? You know, what are the thoughts and the feelings that are getting in the way? And then what are you doing to get relief from that? You know, what behaviors are you doing to get relief from that? Because fear is a very, very, fear fuels the ego, and the ego kicks in and starts telling you, don't do that. You know, you're going to fail. Don't do this, don't do that, you know. And so we end up doing other things instead of other behaviors that would lead us to more satisfaction and towards what's important to us. So I work linearly. It's a linear learning model. Now, I can talk about your past, but it's going to come down to, what are we going to do right now? Type thing.
Yeah.
Yes, what happened here may affect you here, but how is it that we're moving forward in your behaviors? Because that's all I have to observe. You can tell me one thing, but your behavior may show something else. And if there's a contradiction, then what's the reason that it's happening? Is the behavior true, or is what you told me is true? If there's a contradiction.
Yeah.
Right. So the only thing I can observe is that behavior, because I can't get in your head. It's not like I can time you in a 40-yard dash and I can, yes, this is how fast you ran. Right. And I can videotape it and I can break it up and show you specifically. I can't do that in your head. You know, I can only go by the behaviors that you're choosing. And so that's what we work on from there. But my point is treating the athlete holistically and not breaking that apart.
I can't remember. Did you go LPC first or sports psych? And is sports psych, is that what's the triple ASP or what?
ASP.
ASP.
Yeah, AASP, Association
Okay.
for Applied Sports Psychology.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did you go ASP first or LPC or?
I went, well, I was doing both at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it was really, really good. So my mentor was Dr. Rick McGuire down at Mizzou,
Uh-huh.
head track and field coach down there and Olympic coach and everything else. But he was very reluctant at the time because initially when I started out, when I was a member of ASP because I'd gotten a master's degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in sports psych.
Yeah.
And part of that master's program, you had to join ASP, Association for Applied Sports Psychology,
Okay.
because I had 9 hours in sports psych as part of that program. And at the time, they had a certification. It was a certified consultant through ASP and highly regarded. You know, you basically had to have that to work with professional athletes, professional teams. But at the time, you had to have a PhD. Well, I didn't have a PhD. I just finished my master's in kines. So I called Dr. McGuire and said, "Hey, you know, I'm an alumni of Mizzou, and you know, and I know that you mentor people in sports psych." And the association asked, excuse me, they had just dropped their standards to allow master's degree level students to get the certification, but you had to do more internship hours.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
instead of 400, you had to do 700.
Yeah.
Okay, so he says, no, I'm not going to do that. You got to have a PhD. And so I kept talking to him, kept bothering him. And he said, okay, I'll do it. He said, you're an alum. He says, you have to promise you're going to get your PhD. I said, yes, coach, I'll do it, you know. And I said, what do we got to do? And he says, well, you have to, you have to come down to my classes and sit in my classes. Because you don't have to pay anything. You don't take any tests, but you got to sit through all my classes. So I had to, he taught 3 classes, 9 hours.
Okay.
And I had to drive down to Columbia every Monday and sit in his class and take his class, all 3 of them. He just wanted to see if I would do it.
Yeah.
You know, and I did.
Testing you. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
did. And then once I got certified, and I was going to go the licensure route because you're not going to get any professional clients. It's very difficult to get a professional client if you're not licensed.
Yeah.
Just like a pro athlete's not going to go see a doctor that's not licensed.
Sure.
You know, it's just, and no team's going to hire you unless you have a license. I mean, you're working with $1 million assets or D1, D2 college students. I mean, they're not going to hire you unless you hold a license to work with them. So I got a hold of Pat Ross, you know,
Yeah.
and told him who I was, what I was doing. And he said, yeah, come on in. I'd love to have you. I was like, holy cow. Cause it was pro bono at the time. You know, I was just trying to get hours and went in and talked to him and he said, love to have you. And away we went. He introduced me to the team and away we went. And I thought, holy crap, I have no idea what I'm doing. You know? So then I was kind of doing both at the same time. So I was, you know, satisfying to get my hours, although Coach McGuire, there was a friend of mine who was going through being mentored by him as well, supervised by him, which was a requirement of ASP that you had to have a supervisor. And he said, don't go to him with 700 hours. You're gonna need at least double that. And I thought, oh, okay. So when I finally went to him and said, hey, coach, you know, you sign off on me, you know, I had 1,500 hours.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hours, you know, that I had. So I had more than doubled that in time.
Yeah.
But here's my other point. I mean, so if you get certified, so now if you get certified as a consultant, they call it certified mental performance consultant now, CMPC. And then you can go hang a shingle out if you want to start with athletes. But with the licensure, when I went through to get my license as an LPC, I had to do 600 hours of internship to get my degree, which I spent in the athletic department because I didn't have anybody.
Yeah.
And so they said, okay, you know, we'll let you do it. It's a great idea, but it has to be mental health related. So, okay. Well, most of the athletes that came to me had some type of mental health issue, depression, anxiety, anger, substance abuse, whatever it was. I mean, there was something in there that was not only affecting their life, but their performance as well. So it's kind of double dipping a little bit. But then once I graduated, to get my state license, I had to take an exam,
Yeah.
background check, and I had to do 3,000 hours to get my license. And 1,200 of that had to be direct hours, one-on-one, just like you and me,
Yeah.
working with athletes. So I was still at Lindenwood doing that. And I had to be supervised by somebody doing it. So I had to get more hours on top of it. So I think in the end, I had maybe over 5,000 hours, which was crazy
Yeah.
at the time, you know, in doing that. But that's the difference when you go to somebody who's licensed and who's not licensed.
Yeah. So I remember talking to you around 09, give or take a year.
Yeah. Yeah. For some reason, I thought it was early, but yeah, you're right.
Was you. Yeah. And then in 2012, I worked at Mizzou as an intern over the summer, and Dr. McGuire would spoon feed the football staff like sports psychology nuggets, and then they would take that and they would educate they would sit their football team down in like an auditorium, and they would have, on top of other things, they would have sports psych sessions, like maybe 25 minutes, maybe an hour long, but they would empower these, like, 18 to 22-year-old young men with all this other stuff. And so you guys and others, I went through Linwood's pro counseling program, and I did my NCE.
Yes.
And then by the time that hit, I was a strength coach. I was really happy with what I was doing. I was like, and we were just having our first kiddo. So I have not done the licensure, but I kind of built up to it. And so, it's a lot.
It is. It's a lot to ask you after you just completed your master's.
Yeah.
Now I got to go do this.
Yeah, that's,
I have to take another test.
it's a big sacrifice.
A boards exam. I got to take that and then do 3,000 hours. And the hard part was finding a resource to be able to do that, because I knew I wanted to just work with athletes. Yeah. And so that was the hard part. But luckily I was able to stay on at Lindenwood and do that. And able to get the hours, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy getting the hours, because when I was at Lindenwood, after about 5 years, I was working with the football team, and I thought, man, this is going pretty slow, because athletes don't come to you unless they're in a crisis.
Yeah,
they just don't, even though they should probably come way before that.
Yeah,
because like I said, it's that fix it model. Fix me. I'm having a crisis. Fix me now. What can you do for me? Type thing. You only maybe got 3 sessions to do it, but so I was there 5 years, and then other coaches were wondering, well, who's this guy that's at football all the time, standing on the sidelines? He's at the games, and what does he do? And John Creer, at the time, the athletic director, well, this is what he's doing. He's doing mental performance and counseling and sports psychology with the team. Well, I want him here. And so John Greer says, hey, look, there's a lot of coaches that want you to work with their teams. Okay. And so away I went, and I picked up, I think, 10 teams altogether, which was only a fraction. Remember, because Lindenwood had 50 athletic teams.
Baby. We had essentially the most in the nation.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is really treating their student life sports.
That's right. Yeah. And some of those competed D1.
Yeah.
Some of those competed at the D1, D2 level. Yeah.
Interesting. A crazy model.
It was. And when it was NAI, it was just, I think at one time they had 55 athletic teams. They dialed it down now, but it was 55 teams, I believe.
I used to I'd make a joke in talking to coaches, like, let's hypothetically, let's pretend you had a badminton team or something, and somebody's like, they used to have badminton here. I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
And they claim they did. So if they're pulling my leg or not, I never looked into it. But
funny story. So I went, John Creer called me in, and he said, can you do that? I said, yeah, I can do it. He says, well, what do you need? I said, well, I need a web page. I'd like to talk to the newspaper. And they were great, because they did a story on me. I went to Lindenwood TV. They did a story. And then he says, well, we have the annual coaches meeting in August. Will you speak at that? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And they said, and then all the athletes are coming in. We have to run 2 sessions because we have 1,600 of them. And it'll be at the performance center. We'll give you a microphone and you just stand out there. And so I did that too with all the athletes. But with the coaches, what's interesting was when a lot of them knew who I was, some of them didn't. But once I gave that 15-minute elevator speech to them, it just snowballed.
Let's say somebody's just post-injury and they're listening to this or watching this. What are some of the tools that you might give somebody for like an injury, whether it's dealing with it mentally or making the comeback or anything like that?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to look at that the post-injury, the rehab becomes the sole focus, not necessarily the sport performance itself. Because they want to jump over that and think about, I want to get back on the field. I want to get back to where I was, I want to do that.
Yeah.
It's a different mindset. The focus is now your rehab. That's your sport performance.
Yeah.
Is your rehab and
Yeah.
where you focus. And you're gonna have a lot of demons show up, depending on the injury that you have. But a lot of it's fear and trusting your body again and those types of things. And the thing is, you're going to want to move away from, because like I said, the ego is very powerful and fear fuels that ego. It's very powerful to move. You don't do that because you might re-injure yourself again. Or you might have a different injury because you're weak in that, because of the injury, you might injure this. But the thing is to keep them moving linearly, because it's a learning model. They have to be able to make behavioral choices of things that are going to give them a little bit of satisfaction towards what's important, which is recovering and moving through rehab at a good pace, and without moving too fast, because that fear is still going to be there, and that's going to be the demon that they have to fight.
Yeah.
And along with that comes the doubts and the thought process, but the fear, the feeling, the emotions that come in. So you're going to have high fear and low confidence. So it's an inverse relationship. People with high confidence have low fear. Doesn't mean they have no fear. It's just low, and the vice versa. So that's going to be your struggle. So they have to realize that, what choices can I make right now? I can do behavior choices over here that's going to give me relief when that fear shows up. Like, I'm going to skip rehab because it hurts, or I'm not seeing progress. Or I can choose. Can I choose this behavior over here that's going to move me a little bit towards recovery? In doing that, yes, it's hard. Yes, I have the fear. Can I have the fear and do it anyway, type thing? And that's where the focus is.
Yeah. You think it's kind of makes me think about it's funny what your nervous system will guard you against and protect you against.
Yes.
Like, there's even times that you ask people to like do a toe touch, like a standing toe touch, to bend over and touch their toes, and they can't do it. And then you might do something like elevate their heels, and they can do it. And then you bring them back down to flat, and now they can touch their heels, or touch their toes, pardon me. It's like, sometimes you just like teach the nervous system that it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And physically it allows you to do it. So it kind of made me think of that.
And that's a great point, because I get this a lot from coaches. So when a coach will come to me and says, well, I have somebody that says I have an athlete says they can't do something, whatever it might be. And I said, okay, so let's look at this. Do they lack the ability to do it? If they lack the ability, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing mentally that you're going to do if they actually lack the ability. Chances are they have the ability because they're playing the sport. All right. So we're good with that. The next question is, can they do it? Are they not doing it because they don't have the skills? And here again, the physical skills. If that's an issue, here again, I can't help them. You can visualize riding a bike till the cows come home.
Sure.
But the first time you get on a bike, you're going to fall off because you haven't developed the skill of riding the bicycle.
Yeah.
You don't know what balance feels like, and gravity and kinetic energy and these types of things. So if it's determined they lack the skill, then that's up to the coach, strength coach, to develop that skill set. If it's determined they do have the skill, now we've kind of debunked that. So you have the ability and you have the skill. and yet you're saying you can't do it. So what's the reason that you can't do it? The question is, you can do it. You're choosing not to do it, or you won't do it. What's the reason? Fear. There's a fear factor. It's fear that's keeping them back. And that's what we have to work on.
Yeah.
Because we've negated everything else that it could be. So it's fear. Remember, high fear, low confidence. And so you want to reverse that. You want high confidence, low fear, not no fear, but low fear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the next time I come back to the park, the fear's back up again. Right. And so then I drive back home, fear goes back down again. And you get caught in this loop, and then you feed in all these other thoughts too, don't do that, you're going to die. Don't do that, you're going to die, you're going to fall off. It's going to break down, you're going to get stuck, whatever it might be type thing. And so that's the important aspect of it, is moving linearly to find out, choosing the behaviors to find out what works and looking at it as a totality of what works and what doesn't work. That gives you psychological flexibility, because now I have choices. This isn't working. I'm going to go over here and choose this instead.
Yeah, that's
If that makes sense.
Gosh, it just sounds like a return to play protocol for posting for the physical side. It's success in motion. Every time there's a flare up and you've done too much, you get a little setback. So how do you avoid those setbacks? By taking the small steps. So yeah. Except with physical therapy, you're able to measure and observe it. If they have a knee injury, the angle of the knee and how they're progressing, things like psychologically, you can't. Yeah. You can't see that, what's going on. So, you look at the behavior of what's going on. The behavior will tell it. And it's important for them to come up with their own behavioral solutions, because they're more likely to stick to them. It's important for them to come up and find out what works and what doesn't work, what they learn from it, and notice that, because then that creates psychological flexibility, that they have a greater range of choices and not just being rigid in these choices when fear shows up. That I have this fear, I'm going to go get relief. I'm going to go drink, I'm going to go eat, I'm going to binge, I'm going to play video games, whatever it might be. I'm not going to do rehab today because it hurts. That type of thing. So is their tool, referring back to what you're talking about with tool, empowering people with tools earlier, is their tool just like self-awareness?
No, it's actually, so Dr. Polk took acceptance and commitment training, and because it's so complex to try and, I understand it as a clinician and how to apply it, but how do I relate that to my clients? Because you have to keep it simple. Athletes want things simple. They want tools, and they want to be able to use it right away, because not many of them want to just keep coming back to you. And if you're seeing me 5 to 10 times, granted, I love seeing and talking with you, but something's going on. Something's going on where you're not making those choices that you need to make. So what he did was he actually made a tool. It's a grid. He calls it the matrix, but it's an actual grid itself. And when I do workshops, I have a whiteboard just about that size right there, and I outline it on the whiteboard, and I give them a handout. It's old school. They get a handout and a piece of paper, and a pen, and then they can map out their own thing and actually see what they're doing with their behaviors in regard to something specific, like what's important to you or who's important to you, and how they're behaving and that type of thing. And at first athletes like, well, do I do this every time? No, you don't. It's when you struggle. It's just like when you're riding a bike.
Yeah.
When you get off balance, you make the correction and you keep moving forward. This is the same analogy. So when you get out of balance, you make the correction, you move forward. However, it is a skill. You have to practice it and be aware of it. So it develops mindfulness. That's the true definition of mindfulness, not meditation. I mean, you can meditate if you like, but a true definition of mindfulness is being aware in the moment of what's going on without judgment. So you're being mindful of what's going on, and then you're making choices in service of what's important to you. That gives you that satisfaction. It's not a guarantee, But if we know that you're stuck in this loop over here on this side, and that's not working, are there other choices? Well, and by writing it out, they're like, well, I instead of doing that, I could choose that instead. I don't know what's going to happen, but I could choose it instead.
Sure, yeah.
Bingo, psychological flexibility. They just created some more flexibility. And they're moving linearly. So now I'm going to do that and see what happens. And I'll learn from that. You have to learn from it. Good or bad, right or wrong, however you want to label it. You have to learn from it because it's a new experience, it's new behavior. You're going to learn from it.
I'm a dad, so
Yeah.
any direction you want to take about some keeping the kids awesome, I'm interested.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things with youth sports now is, they have more resources available to them than maybe what I had when I was growing up. And he didn't have social media, he didn't have access to a lot of coaches and specific coaches and things like that. And I get parents that'll say, hey, can you work with my son? He's 10 years old. He's got anger issues. That's part of the anger might be because of the parents.
Yeah.
And because the parents want to a lot of times lock them into a niche sport. So if I can make my son or daughter the best at tennis, then they will, become the next, Serena Williams type thing. Now, the child may enjoy tennis and love playing tennis, but here's the thing: when they're young, kids love to do other things that their friends are doing and everybody else is doing with regards to sports. And you think about this growing up, how many sports did you play growing up? You didn't play one, played many sports growing up. And then usually by the time you hit high school, it's maybe one or two sports. And some athletes just choose the one. I really love basketball. That's where I'm going to focus, type thing, and work towards getting that scholarship. So my advice is, don't take it too seriously because you may be part of the problem. If they're having anger issues or they don't want to put the training and time in, type thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want to try something new. They're tired of playing tennis. They want to play football.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let them explore other sports, because research has found out that children playing in multiple sports end up being better athletes in the long run.
Yeah.
When they finally do decide to choose one particular sport, as opposed to locking them in to just that one sport and moving them throughout their career, high school, college, and whatever.
Got my son's doing a little bit of wrestling. He just turned 5, so
yeah,
it's casual, but he's loving it.
Yeah.
But you see the dads that are there. There's some tough looking guys there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can tell how invested they are in, like,
yes,
how my son does wrestling right now as a 5 or 6-year-old is a reflection on me.
Yes.
And and the funny thing is, there's this dad there that is like the most casual, chill. He's underweight and doesn't look like he does any kind of training, and his son is kicking everybody's ass.
Yes.
But it's just you get a really clear picture of that. And I've coached some youth sports for the last few years, and yeah, us parents we get invested fast.
Yeah. The vicariously living through wanting the best for your children. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to be careful, because is it what your son or daughter wants?
Yeah.
Specifically? Do they want to just stay in softball throughout Little League and college and high school, college, and that type of thing? Or do they want to do something else? And it's a hard decision. I remember when I was at Lindenwood, I had a gal on the softball team. She was an all-conference, all-American. Senior year, decides to quit. She was done, tired of it. She'd been doing it all her life. It's all she ever did. And she missed being with her friends, and she wanted to spend her senior year hanging out with her friends. And her dad came to every single game. And he was very upset. He was upset, very hurt emotionally, and everything else. And we talked about it, and she said, she said, Dr. Stan, I've been doing it all my life, and I don't know anything else, type thing. But My point is allow them to explore other sports. It will make them better athletes down the line. And chances are by the time they're in high school, they're gonna narrow it down to one or two.
Yeah.
They're gonna narrow it down to one or two. And it may not be the one they grew up learning. Maybe something completely different that they enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But because they had multiple sport experiences when they were young, they're better athletes now when they make that decision.
Yeah.
And they don't have so much resentment because mom and dad kept me in this sport. I had to be in this sport. It's the only way I was going to get a scholarship in this sport and to go play. Because children know right away, not right away, but early on, they know whether or not they're good at what they're doing. They love baseball, which may not be very good at it. But mom or dad wants you to stay in it. That's frustrating. Because kids know I'm not better than the other kids, and I'm not getting better, and I don't like it. And mom, you're going to stay in it, because dad played baseball, your uncle played baseball, grandpa played baseball, whatever. That's your scholarship. You're going to stay in it, type thing. And they know that, they don't have the skill set, and mom and dad are hiring all kinds of coaches and everything else to try and help them, and it's not clicking. Now the crazy thing, he might be better in basketball.
Yeah.
Or might be better in archery.
Yeah.
Type thing. But he's never allowed to explore it.
Worked with I got to work with the Rams for a year, and they had a quarterback in AJ Feely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His parents, he was a basketball player growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then they found out he was really good at playing quarterback, and he was all set up till like age 14. The focus was all basketball set.
Yeah.
And then he just turned out to be a football stud, and that's the way it went. And
Yeah.
it worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you just exploring, and like you think about, like, you have to be, amateur athletics is like based on love. So like if you're not loving it, gosh, to be forced to go do something, that'd be like
Yeah.
like busting bricks on a chain gang kind of.
Yeah. I don't know. Coaches would say, how do I motivate my players? Or can you come talk to them at halftime? And it's like, man, that's your job, coach, motivate. But if an athlete comes to me and says, I'm having problems staying motivated, well, then you're probably in the wrong sport.
Yeah. Not excited.
Yeah. I mean, you should want to get out there and play, regardless if you're practicing or playing a game. I mean, this is something that you love, and you don't require somebody else to motivate you to go out there and play well.
Yeah. You
have the passion to do that. And is it because they've lost the passion? Like when I was talking about that softball player, or maybe they're in a sport they don't really love anymore. It's easy for a kid.
Yeah.
When they're growing up, playing football, and all of a sudden they grow out of the love for it. They really want to play basketball. And that's where their passion is. You don't have to motivate them to do anything. They're up to crack of dawn and they're out, playing basketball, and off they go.
Disordered eating or some form of body image issues, maybe a tool or some insight for those struggling with it, and maybe for us coaches, like what are we watching for, and how can we be helpful?
The big thing is looking for the signs and symptoms, to recommend them to maybe go talk with somebody. They have to want to do that themselves. Because it can be a very difficult addiction to overcome, and you're looking for kind of like this preoccupation with exercise and eating. Their diets are off. I worked with a gal who, she was amazing. She ran cross country. She was All-American, but she was eating carrots and M&Ms type thing. So, and I don't know how she was functioning, but those are some of the things that you really want. Are they sleeping well? Obviously, the loss of weight. They look emaciated. How's their strength? How's their motivation going? What are teammates telling you? That type of thing. And sometimes you have to get them into actual rehab if it's extensive. To get them in rehab. I have seen, it's interesting because with social media and there had been a big push with, and you see this a lot too in various commercials about body image now. And it's not so much the supermodels all the time. It's becoming more acceptable, to love yourself and who you are, and and not to be always thin. And you'll see gymnasts who are, which was notoriously for being slim or having a weight limit, and a lot of those aren't, and they're fantastic. I mean, their athleticism is fantastic off the wall. And that's a good thing. And the other thing too is you're seeing, which probably didn't have 10 years ago, is you have a nutrition specialist on staff. You have dietitians on staff to monitor athletes. And some sports have their own dietitians, like football, type thing. And that's great because I believe every sport should have their own dietitian just for that reason, because they can monitor eating habits and behavioral issues and that type of thing and look for signs and symptoms and things where you didn't have that 10 years ago. You were on your own when you ate and nobody was monitoring. And next thing you know, it's like so-and-so's lost a lot of weight, but now you have nutritionists on board that are able to monitor that, and that's a really good thing. And I think it's really been good for that community to really, you don't have as many incidents of it, but you can, because it can be deep seated, you can just take somebody to say, hey, you're fat, and, and off you go, that type of thing. Yeah, so I know when I work with them individually, and I don't get as many. I had a few at Lindenwood, not many, but I had a few at Lindenwood just because they still had to go out and compete. So they weren't severe enough to go into rehab, probably borderline, but it's you have to be very supportive and understanding. It's a very slow process, very, very small behavioral changes. It's not about why aren't you eating, or you're losing too much weight and that type of thing. It's kind of figuring out what's motivating this, and then how can we do other things that maybe move away from that and change some of that motivation with different behaviors that'll get you where you got to go. But the important thing is that they have to want to seek help, and that's the sad part of it. Sometimes it's very difficult sometimes because they might not see an issue. Everybody around them sees an issue. They might not see an issue. So that's very important.
If you've never spoken to anyone who's logical in all their thinking except for one thing, such as thinking they're overweight and they're clearly not, it's those are interesting conversations to have.
Yes.
It's like, it blows your mind a little bit the first few times.
Yeah.
First few experiences with that.
Yeah. Because the instant reaction is no, you're not, type thing.
Yeah.
Or you are, that type of thing too. And that's not what they're looking for. But the conversation can be had as to what has led you to believe that about yourself. Where does that come from? And because sometimes, like I said, it could be somebody said something, or it could be they're comparing themselves to everybody else. And that's why it's good when you have a dietitian or a nutritionist on staff, because they can really work with them then and look for all those signs and symptoms as well and help out with that so much, as opposed to just kind of letting them do it on their own.
Yeah.
Because once it becomes crisis and chronic, then and their performance is suffering. And then looking at going into rehab and that type of thing. So it's a very, very difficult thing to overcome. Yeah. Once it gets to that point.
Yeah. I had some conversations with people struggling with that, and I just remember one of my first encounters with it was working in this big, like grandiose Bally Total Fitness. Like they got like 27 treadmills in the front row.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
20 ellipticals behind that or whatever. There's this one guy that would come in and he would put in so much work on the elliptical that he'd bring in towels to collect the pool of sweat underneath, like beach towels, and
Yeah.
he'd have them soaking.
Yeah.
And you could smell. They say that like you can smell like
Yes.
the body breaking down.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you don't forget that. You're just like,
yeah,
man, wish I could help you out. But like,
yeah,
you want to do 4 hours of cardio a day.
Yeah.
I'm not in a position to stop you, or like you haven't reached out to me, but like, I mean, it's been like 19 years since I've seen that. And like, it just like, you can almost like just think about it, you can like smell it and just like,
yeah,
oof. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they'll resort to taking a lot of vitamins and supplements to compensate for the food loss.
Yeah.
And then you'll smell that in their breath and in their sweat and that type of thing. So they believe that they make up for it from not taking in solid food. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. You just I guess you just throw as much support as you can at them, and when they're ready, you help them out. And
yes.
What a tough situation when you haven't had those conversations before.
Yeah. And a lot of times those are more than when somebody's put on my radar for that, it's more than, the 1 to 3 sessions. But that's at the extreme. That's above the norm usually. So, and it's a thing where you have to constantly monitor it, and how they're doing and how they're living their life, how they're performing type thing. And, yeah, like I said, that the one girl that I had was living off, and she was eating things out of the trash can in the dormitories, that people would discard and throw away,
To stop her from eating too much, or she was hungry and she was
hungry.
binging. Oh,
Yeah, hungry,
okay.
because,
Okay.
as well as the brain runs on sugar constantly.
Yeah.
So if you deplete the brain of sugar, then, it's going to do whatever it can to get sugar, either taken externally or breaking down the muscle mass, to fuel the body and that type of thing in the brain itself. And so that's, you get those sugar cravings and they would eat stuff. And then, but sometimes then the guilt would show up and then you end up purging it anyway. So,
Yeah.
But to be able to perform at a high level was very interesting in doing that, but not sustainable. I knew it was not sustainable. In her mind, it was sustainable, but it was not sustainable.
Yeah.
And she knew that because she came to see me.
Call this the Winning Wellness Podcast. And
oh, okay. Yeah, I saw that. Yes.
Kind of like,
I like it.
Kind of like the two thoughts to that is that some people are unwell and they need to, as you were saying, like the performance is now just healing or rehab and injury. They need to win their wellness, whether it's mental, physical, disease state, injury, whatever. And then other people to win well and achieve their goals and get the gold medal or the new PR time or whatever it is. Is there anything that comes to mind that people, it's the number one thing people aren't doing, or just the first thing that jumps to your mind as like a spiel on one of those versions of winning wellness?
Developing better psychological flexibility in your thinking and the choices that you make, and the behaviors that you choose that brings you satisfaction towards what it is that's important to you, and to understand that it's a skill that you have to develop, just like any other skill, just like your sports skill, strength and conditioning skills. It's a skill that you have to work on to develop, especially if you move up into the higher elite levels. A lot of times athletes are very, very similar athletically and skill-wise, but what separates is the mental game. And what they're doing with that. And it's not just something you can meditate on. And visualize on. It's just, that's it. It's good if you want to do that and help relax you. Okay. But at some point you have to take action and do behaviors, because that's where the learning comes in. And you can only progress if you're learning as to what works and doesn't work for yourself, because that improves the confidence and lowers the fear.
That circles back to what you were saying is that it's like going to the gym. You gotta put your time in, you gotta develop those skills.
Yes. Yes.
It's not just the go get fixed in one session. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Flexibility.
When I was at Lindenwood, I only had one athlete come into me who functioned at a very high level psychologically.
Yeah.
And she just wanted to check in and, see if there was areas she could improve in. And I said, and after we chatted, I said, I'm not really sure how I can help you because you're functioning at such a high level.
Yeah.
But that was only one. So, 90% of the time it's athletes, like I said, they'll come in when they're in a crisis and then they want you to fix them because for some reason I have all the answers.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, well, if that's the case, I'd be a rich man because there'd be a line out my door, and I would just be fixing people left and right. And, but that's not how it works. It's a skill that you have to develop. And the mind is so powerful, and it is something that you can work with and fix. It's not necessarily something you can control. We've been trying to control the mind for a long time. It's not something you're gonna control or make certain thoughts go away or eliminate them or avoid them and that type of thing. However, you can improve your focus on the things that will allow you to be successful. That's a skill set. And that's where that psychological flexibility comes in, is knowing that I have other choices to make besides what I'm doing over here just to get relief because I have too much fear or too much doubt.
What do you see for the future of yourself and maybe the future of the industry as well?
Future for myself, just living the dream right now, really. I really try and push the independent contractor thing. I think that's a good thing, to start out with. And I hope that universities will not only bring somebody on, but then they are able to have somebody for each team that works with each team that can embed themselves into the culture of that team. They're going to practices, they're going to games, because you have to understand the context when you're working with some athlete. Because an athlete will come to you and they might say, well, you don't understand because you're never there. You don't know what goes on at practice. You don't know what goes on at the game.
Yeah.
And it's true if you're not out there, because you can learn a lot from observing the context of a team, the relationships, the behavior with the coaches and coaches with the players and players with the coaches type thing. I would like to see that. We've seen the push with strength and conditioning. Now everybody has them. Whereas before that wasn't a thing. You didn't have that. Coaches were responsible for any type of working out. Now you have somebody who specializes in that. You have nutrition now, which is really coming on board now. That's really huge. And now you're seeing this push for mental health and mental performance.
Yeah.
And I would love to see that in every university too. And maybe not necessarily if a university can't afford it full time, that do an independent contract type thing and have somebody there. And that would work out tremendously. So.
Yeah, having been in college athletics for neighborhood of 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
You got lots of customers. There's need for the performance, for the care. Yeah.
And that's not where the pushback is. I could do a meeting with every coach in the country, whether it's a specific skill coach.
Yeah.
Basketball, football, softball, badminton, and amongst them are all the strength and conditioning coaches. You throw all them into, and I'd say, how important is the mental game in the sport in which you coach? Would you say it's greater than 50%? Nobody in the room would say it's lower than that.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of keep 70%, 80%. Most of them would say 80, 90%.
Yeah.
That's how important it is. But for some reason, the administrative part of it does not. And that's where I get back to that budget thing. I think it's they don't yet want to put that budget in there because they'll say, well, we have a counseling center, send them there. Great. I don't have any problems with that. But the thing is that a lot of people in the counseling centers don't have the experience of sport. They don't have the training in sport. A lot of them are interns. They're working on their LPCs type thing or whatever. And so it's not a benefit to the athletes at all. You don't do that for strength and conditioning. You don't do that for nutrition. Why are you doing it for mental health, which is extremely important?
Yeah.
The mental health aspect of it. Because if they're not right mentally, they're not going to perform. I don't care what you do. They're not going to perform. And you know that. You've seen it. If they're suffering outside of sport, they're not going to excel in sport. It's not a switch where you just shut it off. And vice versa.
Yeah.
If they're not doing well in sport, they're going to suffer outside of sport. And you have to look at the individual holistically, and you need somebody on staff. So it's never a question of coaches. It's always the administrative part of it. Even in professional sports, same thing. They'll have somebody list strength and conditioning, performance, all kinds of performance analysts, you name it, and nutritionists, and then maybe somebody, it's starting to catch on a little bit, but, and I hope maybe that'll trickle down into the college ranks and the D1, D2s, but it's the pushback from the administrations, the budgets. And that's why the independent contract thing works out great sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we'll try it out.
Yeah.
It won't cost us anything. I mean, it costs us a little bit in salary, but we don't have to pay all these other benefits and costs. As long as you have liability insurance, which I carry, I know you carry too. So, and you just, and you go that route, but at least you have somebody on staff available to work with the athletes, whether it's in the pro ranks or in the college ranks. So
yeah,
that's where I hope to see the future of it. And then maybe someday it becomes, the field of sports psychology becomes licensed. Mental performance, it becomes licensed. Right now it's certified, but it's not licensed. So you got a lot of people out there just hanging their shingle out doing stuff. They have no clue what they're doing. They don't have a lot of training. They don't have a lot of training in the mental health field because they didn't get a license. They didn't do the internships, the 3,000 hours, above and beyond. They just went and got, I think they get certified at ASP. You need 400 hours. You need a master's degree and get 400 hours. And I think 75% of that is in person or something like that. 175 hours, something like that. That's nothing.
Yeah.
That's not, you're not ready. Not ready for that kind of thing. I still learn stuff now. I've been doing 20 years.
Yeah.
Still learn things about athletes and myself and working with athletes. And one thing I've learned, I can't fix them. But I'm great at helping athletes help themselves.
If someone want to reach out to you, is there a good pathway?
Yes. They can email me, committoaction@gmail.com. So COMMITTO, not TWO, action@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And then the website is commit, and then it's -TO -action.com. www. So,
Okay. Right.
So the 2 is actually the word there. So commit to action. So that's what it's about. Taking action on behaviors that are workable, that will give you the satisfaction towards what's important to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
A lot of good
gems
of wisdom in here. And anybody listening, I know I got a lot of it. I'm sure everybody else did too.
Hopefully it helped. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. Good seeing you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Winning Wellness Podcast. Please keep in mind that all views expressed within the show are not a reflection of any universities or organizations that I may be affiliated with. If you have any questions or suggestions for future shows, please reach out through Instagram, where I can be found with the title name of Mitch Schwartzman.